let's get started. This is the TGR breakdown. Glad people have been watching the Sunshine Court one. Yeah, these definitely weren't going to fit in one video. And honestly, I'm afraid for the length of this video because I had 7.5 pages of notes for the Sunshine Court, and I'm holding 19 pages of notes for TGR. So, but yeah, let's get started. So, I also have a pointer stick today. We're in a different location. I wanted a flat surface, and also I wanted to be able to sit down because, guys, I don't know if anyone reads Webtoon, but like a Webtoon creator series of events befell me. I wanted to post this video today, which is a Friday, 1 week after the other one, but things happened. I got sick, and I also fell down some stairs and hurt my knee really bad. And so I don't know if you read Webtoon, but like Webtoon creators, they're like, oh, sorry, can't update this week. Carpal tunnel's acting up and a death in the family. Like, that's how I felt about it. So yeah, not as bad as that, but yeah, I was sick, and then I fell, hurt the knee, so I needed to be like seated for this whole video. So like I'm on a wheelchair right now, and yeah, well, yeah, pray for my knee. Pray for Debbie. If the last book was XC Light and PTSD Recovery High, then this book is not that. This book, the plot, and you'll notice I actually only have the first half of the time period here. When we get to the second half, I'll have to like shift this over, move it over. This book is very different plot structure wise, the types of things that happen. It's much more, in my opinion, similar to AFTG. Like it hits a lot of the same notes that come in the first and second book in AFTG. Like there's an interview, there's the banquet, there's like mafia violence, etc. So yeah, we've done the chapter breakdowns. I've had to add these little sticky notes because like if in the last book we covered a lot of time, like overtime, in this book there's a lot of days that are like very specifically broken down. And a lot of the time I don't really understand, like Nora will start a chapter on a day that's significant, and then like, or start a chapter like the day after something significant happens, and then that chapter will run all the way into the next significant thing happening. And it's like, I feel like I feel like the chapters sometimes like don't make sense. Like things that are together, like I feel like a whole game should be in one chapter, and then, but it'll be like the start of the game is in the end of the previous chapter, and then it'll cut at the half, which does kind of make sense. And then like the second half of the game and like a ton of drama will happen in the next chapter, and then like there'll be some lingering like on in the chapter. Like it's just kind of confusing to me sometimes, the chapter breakdowns. But yeah, so we have a lot of them that like take place on one day. So I'm like, these 3 chapters all take place on one day, so it's a little messy up here, in terms of my notations. But again, John is in purple, Jeremy is in red, and this time we have a lot more Jeremy in this book, so I've had to I'm going to add in a Jeremy constant in our lines, and I was initially going to do yellow for him. I don't think yellow is going to show up super well on the camera, so then I was going to do orange because it's similar to yellow, and then I was like, well, that's a fox color, so I'm going to do red because red is red is the color of the Trojans. So it's going to be red for Jeremy, and then we'll do John in a black line again. So yeah, I've noted the major events up there, at the top, and yeah, we're going to have the Jeremy constant because Jeremy is a lot more involved and a lot more emotionally vulnerable in this one. So he's up there. just to recap, so chapter 1 is literally a day after the Grayson situation and the Neil coming to LA situation. So it's like, that was June 28th. So today's June 29th. It's a Friday. This first chapter is from John's POV. It's just the morning, June 29th. So Lucas and John are fucked up because of Grayson, who Coach Reeman says is banned from campus. John and Lucas can't play in scrimmages, which is sad because today was the day that John was supposed to be back to playing. Yeah, and so then there's like some memories of Zane, Grayson, Rico, etc., blah, blah, blah. And then like they are like, John, don't you want to use some ibuprofen? And he's like, ibuprofen? Drugs? You can't have drugs. And it's like, that's ibuprofen though. So they're like, dude, use the ibuprofen. Also, like, he didn't know it's like an over-the-counter drug. And Xavier is like, dude, where is your rage? Like, why are you not angry that they wouldn't let you have ibuprofen? So it's a good question to ask because John, I think, is angry. But he's angry at like the Trojans for showing that there was no point in him being treated the way he was treated, because like they are still a top 3 XC team and they don't do any of the stuff that like the Ravens did. He's like spent so much time trying to justify the Ravens that he's angry, like that the justifications are falling apart. So yeah. And John thinks they're being hypocritical because asking him about anger because they don't get angry on the court. And I think he still has a long way to go in the social emotional realm because like the Trojans are angry at the injustice of his treatment, but they don't channel that anger into like the same like into like violence like John would. So that's the major difference. And they channel that anger into like becoming better people. So yeah, we continue on to lunch with Jeremy, Kat, and Layla, which is a dynamic that John is much more open in. He's like brusque and coarse with his like, you love those SAT words there. Okay, he's brusque and coarse with his fellow teammates in a way that like works for Neil and the Foxes, but not here at USC. And he has like absolutely no ability to read the room. I don't know whether that's like, it's so unclear how much he's just playing around with his English proficiency versus like truly he doesn't understand the like, I don't know. Oh yeah, the outfit today, the 2007 outfit today is double popped collar polos. So this scene is more of a conversation between friends than we've seen from John previously. There's like mentions of Jeremy's love life, and I feel like that's an indication that he's about to become a larger character in this book. Like he gets a text from like a football player who's like back on campus for practice, and he's like, ooh, maybe I'll hit him up. Anyway, unfortunately the picnic is interrupted because Coach calls to tell them that Grayson has been found dead. And the police are there to like question them. So let me go ahead and add in some lines for the first chapter. So for Jean, I have like a going down because he can't play XC. And Jeremy we'll get into. Okay, so chapter 2, Jeremy POV. So police are interrogating them. Not really officially, but they're like questioning them about Grayson's death and like what they know. We also get an intro to Jeremy's family like a little bit more in this book. He's got a stepdad who's got political and police connections whom he clearly hates. He's also being forced to come home for dinner. Remember, Jeremy's been like allowed to live with Kat and Layla for the summer. Jeremy is a 5th-year senior. So in my reckoning, he's got to be at least 22 or 23, which does make him 3 to 4 years older than John, if that matters to anyone. I don't think it's like a lot, so it doesn't matter. But still. And he's being treated like he's 17, though. which I suppose if someone's controlling your like monetary assets, like your tuition, though could he get a scholarship for XCIDK at this point? But anyway, yeah, so if someone's controlling your monetary assets and tuition, they could definitely force you to do things you don't want to do. So that is, what is that? That's a kind of abuse. That's, I'll figure it out and put words on screen. Jeremy, so he's being interrogated by the police, and then his stepfather calls him on the phone. And he lies to his stepfather on the phone that, like, he's out on a drive and he can't talk right now. And then he speaks to his dad, his dad calls him because Jeremy's mom has been calling his dad. His dad lives abroad, and Jeremy's like, oh, yeah, my dad doesn't care about me, so that's sad. And he's about to, like, smoke a cigarette, and then Layla stops him because she doesn't like cigarettes. And the smoking thing is definitely, like, one of Jeremy's coping mechanisms, and it indicates, like, when things aren't going well. And so they all get back to, like, the apartment, and they're like, how you doing, to John? And he repeats what Neil said when Rico died. Pop, how easily these monsters die in the end. Which, I love a callback, so that's great. And they're all like, wow, we love that for you. We love that you hate this man and that he died and that you're like whatever about it. That's so great. So yeah, so Jeremy is on the way down. Grayson dying, Pop, blah blah blah. I'm gonna go back up for John, and then we have Jeremy going down for the phone calls with both fathers. Then someone named Joshua texts him. This is his brother, which is determined by context clues. He reads it and then dumps his phone in his coffee. So yeah, that is extreme. But also, very 2007 reaction coming up. They immediately are like, get out the rice. We've got to put the phone in the rice. And that is like something you used to have to do. Nowadays, when your phone gets wet, your phone's like, oh, don't charge me for a little while. It's just not the same. Phones are much more better about water these days. But if in 2007 you dropped your phone into water, it was done. It was done. You had to take the battery out, and you had to put everything in rice, and you had to hope. And you don't have to do that anymore. You can't even take the battery out these days. At the same time, we're talking about group chats, which, according to my research, did not exist until 2008 on the iPhone, which the iPhone was introduced in 2007. This is very funny to me because when I was doing this research, when I was trying to figure out, like, can you do a group chat in 2007, I looked up, can you do a group chat on BlackBerry in 2007? Because I thought, like, maybe that's probably the most advanced phone that you could maybe do it on. And literally the second result, nothing in my search query had anything to do with All for the Game. Literally the second result was the AFTG Reddit page. And I was like, oh my God. And from that, I learned that someone said Nora had said something somewhere about forgetting what capabilities phones had in 2007. Which is funny to me because she said she did research into like what classes USC offered in the fall of 2007, so that would be realistic. But like it didn't look up what phones can do. So for Nora, it's 2007 when it's convenient and not when it's not, which is like, that's fine. But the extreme prevalence of group chats is so funny to me because like they kind of need it for a lot of points in this book. And I wonder like whether she had like included group chats and then was like, oh, I need to look up if this works, found out it didn't, and then was like, well, actually I don't care because I kind of need it at this point, which I think that's what happened. Another dip down for the dropping your phone in coffee. Jeremy wants to find a French CD French course so he can learn French, since John said teaching French got him in trouble in the past. So there's a brief discussion of like Kevin and all of his contradictions. And John tells them that he had unwavering commitment to the Ravenclaw's cause. So Kat tells him that she's glad he's alive, and with them, and that they are his friends and they love him. And he totally rejects that and storms out. So let's do a dip back down for that. I like the CD French chorus is cute. So we're going to lift our spirits a little bit up here. Okay. So I find that like to be the major contrast with how book 1 ended. So if, of course, no one was vocalizing this to John at the end of book 1, but he felt this hope that they were his friends, and felt safe with them in what was like canonically 1 day ago. So to me, that's like a little confusing, but Jeremy is able to rationalize it in the sense that like, he comforts John by saying he felt the same way when Kat told him similar things because of feeling unloved by his family. And when they have this conversation, they're sitting like back to back on Jean's bed in this scene and leaning on one another like back to back on a day that's been difficult so far for both of them. And that is just so cute to me. Like, artists, please get out there and draw that. They're both going to move back up for that. All right, so that's the last of John for the day. Jeremy has to go to that dinner, so it's still the same day, chapter 3, Wilshire Knox family dinner. So Jeremy is trying to escape the hell that is his family. His mother bothers him about the LSAT. His brother antagonizes him about him and John. And then the oddest moment in the book for me, literally, this is what inspired the 2007-ness of these videos, is because of this moment right here and how much it kind of like, I was annoyed about it. His mom references the Iraq War, War on Terror, etc., and that it would be good for his step-grandfather's political career that he marry Layla because she's the daughter of a Middle Eastern diplomat. So contemporary politics have literally never come up in these books. And they pretty much don't come up again after this. Like, there's no mention of other political things that are happening, like the fact that Barack Obama is running for president. Like, I just don't feel like the Iraq War, even only indirectly referenced, needed to be like indirectly referenced. I don't feel that it was necessary. His mom could have just said because she's also from like a wealthy diplomatic family, it would be good. I think there are much better 2007 political references that could have been made if we needed to make them, and I really don't feel like we do need to make them. And I get that like this was done to flesh out Jeremy's character because his family, like his step-grandfather and father, are involved in politics. But it just made me like, it took me out of it and made me wonder like what other political references will come up. Like, how far into 2008 will we get? Like, recession? Like, are we going to talk about voting for Obama? Like, if I just felt like if we're talking about the Iraq War, then why aren't we using Facebook? Facebook was invented in 2004. It would have been like used on this college campus. Like, I don't know. If this moment frustrated me, but honestly, it's one page in the book, so I'm going to move on now from it. But it took me out of it because I was like, these books about a made-up sport and the mafia do not need contemporary politics. Bryson tells Jeremy to fail the LSAT or he'll hide contraband in his room for his mom to find. So the dinner is like, let's bring our boy down. He goes on a run and hits up an old friend, Leo, and hooks up with him. They can only hook up secretly because Warren, Jeremy's stepfather, paid Leo off and Leo accepted. So yeah, to me, this felt like a great choice. And I was gonna like take points off for this, but Leo wants to gossip on about John, so Jeremy leaves. But he does say that he feels better for having been with Leo. So yeah, I guess we'll give him the point back up. But I honestly was like, this is not a healthy choice. But he does feel better, so I'm gonna let him feel better. Jeremy goes back to the apartment. He's got the LSAT books, which John is not a fan of. He thinks Jeremy should be focusing on Pro XC. And then John also takes and notices how Jeremy's mood changes when he goes to his family. Takes one to know one. And then Kat and Layla come back and say there's press roving because Grayson's death has been released. And then John and Jeremy go for a run. So cute. Anyway, that's how the chapter ends. So both of them, it's rocky, but they come back to wherever they started on that day. Next chapter is chapter 4 is John POV. So it's the weekend to the 2nd of July. Grayson's death over the weekend gets ruled a suicide. Renee texts John about it. On Monday, July 2nd, everyone is being so nice to John. Cody gives John a peach, and they might as well have given him a gold bar. Derek and Derek, who are strikers, josh around with him on the warm-up run. I like Derek and Derek. They're a very Matt Boyd type of presence. Kat's getting John a motorcycle. John has no money, by the way, so that's rough. But apparently Kat and Layla have been footing the bill for him. I mean, they're all not poor, so. Jeremy is getting texts from Bishop. John, who's the football player. John disapproves of associating with other teams. Kat says he doesn't have many other options. Then John is internally thinking about the Ravens and how they would just hook up with each other regardless of their gender. So basically they're the Navy, or what is stereotyped about the Navy. Anyway, so they agree to scatter after afternoon practice. Kat and Layla are going to go to a museum. Jeremy's going to go see Bishop. Cody offers to give John a campus tour of his schedule and his class schedule, and then take him out to dinner. They'll feed him. So back at court, Riemann is not a fan of the way John is not dealing with his stuff, but will put him in on drills. He wants John to call Dobson, Betsy. Derek faces off against John in drills. John keeps tripping him. And Derek says the Trojans are better players for not using violence and knowing how to play without resorting to it. And he notes for John that without playing that way, they've still always had a winning season. And he tells him the game should be fun and that he'd stop playing if it wasn't fun. And I feel that actually, that should be helpful. That speech should be helpful for John. And I do think it actually has an impact on his outlook about the Trojans. But in that moment, he sees it as a negative because he doesn't really have an option to play just for fun or to quit playing because of the Moriyama deal. Chapter 5 is still July 2nd. This is the thing where I'm talking about, where I don't really understand why we had to switch in the middle of afternoon practice. Sometimes I feel Nora's oh, this is a nice sentiment I wrote. I should end on this. And then we'll switch the chapter. And it's well, maybe you should have held on to that until practice and use that at the end of practice. Because, practice continues at the beginning of chapter 5. So, anyway, he's, there's this team scrimmage. John is frustrated by Trojan playing style. After the practice, Tanner, a freshman, asks John to run Raven drills with him because he's so innocent. Tanner insists and says he'll ask a coach to approve it. Okay, so John goes with Cody, Pat, and Ananya to do a campus tour. He's fourth wheeling the should-be thruple with the third wheel, who's the only person thinking they're at the third wheel, which is such a fun dynamic for John to be in. Anyway, they show him campus and then they take him out for Indian food, which he refuses to eat because he's not confident about whether it fits into his diet plan. Pat says Jean is afraid to eat, not conscientious, and Pat is like angry at John about it. This group of three is less good at dealing with Jean, who leaves the restaurant but doesn't go home and calls Betsy. He's pushed into agreeing to call her the next day on the condition he won't have to talk, like she'll do all the talking. He then goes back in, but is kind of like shut down. He doesn't really respond to any of their like kind of invitations to conversation. And then he walks home with Cody and says that when he sees Layla's house, he feels like more settled. That's great. Cody gives him the leftovers and tells him to go over them with Kat. Cody waits with John for everyone else to come home, and they discuss all their, and like while they're waiting, they discuss all their other teammates' playing styles, which is a great activity for John, who should be a future sports analyst. When Kat and Layla get home, Cody tells them Jean hasn't eaten. Kat goes over the macros with him and wonders why he didn't trust his work. She asks him what he thinks the consequences would be if he was wrong, if he's scared of them. And he says he's not, and Kat tells him to trust himself, and then he finally like eats the food and he's like, oh, it is good, like blah blah blah. Let's add in our lines. So no movement on Jeremy. I'm just gonna leave him solidly up here until we get to the next chapter. And then Jean, we are gonna go over, and then he gets that peach from Cody, and everyone's being nice to him. So we go up, and then we go down for the dinner fiasco. And then we're going to go back up when Kat tells him to trust himself and eat and like, you know, not be afraid. And he does eat. We're going to go back up. All right. And then we're just going to go over here to July 4th. Chapter 6, Jeremy POV. John didn't know about July 4th. So he also doesn't know his birthday. Doesn't know any holidays. They have to call Coach and ask for it. So it's November 9th, by the way. And so they're looking at the calendar to add in his birthday. And, we must note to check in with the Foxes on July 23rd. And why? Oh, yeah. Aaron's murder trial is on July 23rd. Remember how Aaron murdered Drake? That trial's on July 23rd, so we have to check in on that day. Jean is not happy that they don't have practice on July 4th. So Jerry consoles him with watching a Trojan game, and John calls Jeremy very good. And Jeremy's like, oh my God, I love him, I think. Jeremy tells him their plans, and Nora, honest to God, wrote that Jean, from Jeremy's POV, that John changed into his coolest clothes. And I'm like, what clothes are these? Like, this is so funny to me that Jeremy would describe some of John's clothes as his coolest clothes, and then Nora does not describe those to us, because what was cool in 2007 is not cool today. They go to Jeremy's home where his private chef has made them food. They didn't ask for this, by the way, but still. Jean explores the home, finds a photo on the mantelpiece, and there's like another sibling that he didn't know about of Jeremy's, and who is dead, and they have like a brief discussion of grief, because remember, John just found out that his sister's dead. So at the beach, everyone's having fun, but Jean is concerned about Xavier since he had surgery. Thought he'd had heart surgery, and bless his soul. In a conversation that we're not privy to, because this is Jeremy's POV, Xavier explains that he's trans and that he had top surgery to John. And John is like, okay, I don't care. And he holds no prejudice about this. So that's really sweet. Then they go to see some fireworks. John is kind of startled. And then Jeremy, like, they're like standing really close to each other so they can whisper into each other's ears while the fireworks are happening. Jeremy says he's glad he came, glad that John came. John rebuffs that, but then he whispers into Jeremy's ear that he doesn't know the name for fireworks. And yeah, so Jean's lips brush Jeremy's ear, and this is the slow burn equivalent of a first kiss. Oh my god. So yeah, they're like, ooh. So we're both gonna take a bump up from that. For Jeremy, I'm just gonna do like a brief bump up and then come back down to baseline. For Jean, this is like, we're gonna sustain this because fireworks, he has like a couple things he repeats to himself. Rainbows, open road, friends, fireworks. So since this gets added to one of his mantra, it's like a sustained point up. So the rest of the week, John's Raven drills get approval. But Jeremy worries about staying later for practice when he already will have to drive so far once the semester starts. He worries about the LSAT. He worries about his brother. And then Coach Riemann piles it on by asking if Jeremy's coming to the banquet, which he hasn't been to in 3 years, even though it's supposed to be mandatory. So trauma there that we haven't uncovered yet. I think that's another reason why I just brought him down, because it's like, ugh. So chapter 7... Jeremy is also from Jeremy's POV. At this point of the book, at the end of chapter 6, we are 25% of the way through this book, and only 1 week has been covered. I will say right now that this book ends late September, early October, and I'm very nervous about how long book 3 will be. I will go over that more at the end of this video, but I feel like we could be looking at 4 books here. Remember when I made a video about like, oh my god, Nora's coming back, and then was like, I thought it was 3 books, and then I was like, oh wait, maybe it's 2, because she said it was 2, and now it's 3. I feel like it might be 4, just based on how much time is covered in each book. So chapter 7 is a long haul. We're going to go all the way from July 9th to August 3rd. So on July 9th, Lucas is back from grieving his brother. Jean's doing Raven drills, practicing nonviolence, listening to Betsy once a week. Jeremy's avoiding the LSATs and learning French. We let 2 weeks pass in 1 or 2 pages. Or for Jean, we're just going to go up a point for these 2 weeks. All right, to the 22nd. So I'm just going to go, but I didn't make it a sustained point down. So we're going to go ahead and dip down for the LSAT studying thing and worrying and all of that stuff. But then we're going to come back up to baseline through to Aaron's trial. Then on to the 22nd, all focus turns towards the foxes and Aaron's trial. I love those silly foxes. By Wednesday the 25th, there's still no verdict. Layla brushes Jean's hair to help him relax, and he lets her. So that's a +1 on the 25th, or on the 25th. So we go up. Don't die, Sharpie. And then on the 26th, Aaron is cleared of all charges. Cleared of all charges? He did murder someone. I suppose we could call it, like, was it self-defense? No, but he didn't go in with the intent to kill. But someone did die. I don't know. I'm not going to debate the legality of any of this. Okay, so realized you couldn't see the Jeremy constant in this camera view. So I've changed that so that you can now see the Jeremy constant. Anyway, we were talking about the car. So we skipped from the verdict to August 3rd. The Ravens send John his car. Apparently, all the ravens get cars, which doesn't make sense to me because they're not allowed to lead the nest, but they have cars. Supposedly, sending John the car is a bribe to prevent John from bad mouthing Edgar Allan at the interview. I was initially worried that this was like a dead fox situation, given past events, but it's not. So the car is an Audi S4. I'm assuming it's from 2004, given that John's a senior. So the thing is not sleek, as Jeremy had said, in my opinion, but that's just my opinion. John wants to get rid of it, but they agree to figure that out later. So I'm going to leave John where he is at 8. We're just going to kind of plateau here because I don't think it's like, he doesn't necessarily have a bad reaction to it. Jeremy says he's rattled, but at the same time, he said he didn't want anything from the Ravens, which I think is a good thing. Kevin also gets his car returned. And Kevin and all of his stuff, unlike John's stuff, Kevin's stuff is fine. It's not wrecked. Kevin agrees that EA is probably trying to buy their silence. So, yeah, let me just add a little line for Jeremy. Through to here, car. Okay. So, chapter 8. Still with Jeremy. It's insane. We've gone so long without John. This book has been mostly Jeremy. We've had 5 Jeremy chapters to 3 John chapters. John was chapter 1, chapter 4, and chapter 5, and we've had Jeremy chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 6, chapter 7, and now chapter 8. So we skip even like a portion of the year that's just not described, from August 3rd to August 10th. So August 10th is the day that the day that Kevin and Andrew, by the way, arrive, and Jeremy picks them up from the airport. Andrew came with Kevin. It's the day before the interview. Because, if Neil got near a reporter, you know how that goes. So he didn't. Jeremy has like a total bro crush on Kevin. I love the way the foxes talk, by the way. It's like such a blast from the past with the Trojans being so normal. Jeremy mentions he thought Neil would have come to visit John again, and everybody is like, wait, what? Neil was here? Ooh, when was this? Neil Jostin apparently does not share his mafia or FBI, the complete story of his FBI dealings with everyone else. And when Jeremy says it was the same weekend Grayson died, Kevin and Andrew put 2 and 2 together. Jeremy is oblivious, though, because he's a pure soul. Remember, folks, this book is about the mafia, too. Kevin bosses John around, to which John reacts poorly. Jeremy thinks that John has, like, a crush on Kevin, which is true. And so, like, he's, like, reacting to Kevin, making him try on all these different clothes for the interview in like a queer self-loathing kind of way. Anyway, they're really weird about Exy. They're so obsessed, like it's their entire lives. They do some cooking. Kevin asks how John learned, and John says cat and that it's stress relieving for him, and Kevin's glad that he has got something like that to relieve stress for him. So that's nice. Jeremy gets a little insight from Kevin on why John is the way he is and the Raven cult mind virus. They disagree about what John needs and deserves. Jeremy wants justice. Kevin wants peace, is basically how it boils down to. So Kevin is like, I sent John here so that he would have peace from all of the madness. And Jeremy's like, well, I want justice. Chapter 9, we finally get some John POV. We're gonna dip down for the like Kevin being annoying situation and then come back up for whatever. And then Jeremy just is gonna go straight across. The day of the interview, August 11th. It's John's point of view, chapter 9. The boy is stressed. He throws up his breakfast, and yeah, so would I. I'm a nervous puker, and I would do that too. Jean is pissed at Kevin for drinking. And I'm like, boy, if you only knew the situation going down at Palmetto State, the drinking, the drugs. Jean, my body is a temple, yet also it deserves to be beaten around whenever, apparently. So he's kind of bizarre about that. And he calls them hypocritical. At the interview, Kevin is like total press Kevin. And he's kind of like a Neil-esque at this point. And John totally hates that. John is not prepared to be in front of the press at all because he's never done that before. Remember, English is not even his first language. They press Jean on how he knew to help Zane. He tells Kevin in French. Kevin translates Raven speak and French into normal people speak. Kevin is going full Neil. Love it. John can't keep up. She asks him about Grayson. And this man is like falling between the cracks of then and now and here and what. And he like, yeah. So Kevin tells the reporter to move on. I think her name is Heather. So she does and reveals that John's parents have been arrested by Interpol. Like, no one was ready for this an hour ago, and that his sister can't be found. We know she's dead. But anyway, Jean really cannot deal. And then one of the producers starts speaking in French, and John is like, what the fuck? Because, like, obviously she's been able to understand them this entire time. Jean is alarmed and switches to Japanese, and he and Kevin decide to, like, take a break from the interview. And Jean, like, leaves out to the car. And Jeremy's initially going to go with him, but then Andrew's like, hold up. I got this. And I'm like, yeah, I love you. Out of the car, Jean and Andrew have a fun little discussion about who deserves to be sexually assaulted and rehashing Drake and Grayson. And Jean confirms that Neil had Grayson killed. Okay. John calls Neil, and Neil did not know that John's parents were going to be arrested. Neil tells him to demand privacy because feigning ignorance would make him less reliable when it comes to the actual trial. Neil will do some secret agenting in the meanwhile to figure out what Jean should say in the long run when reporters talk to him about this again. I thought it was an interesting choice to leave Jeremy out of this conversation. Obviously, John needs someone to be with, but Andrew is the best choice here because he probably understands the most what Jean is going through in terms of Grayson and what his involvement with Neil is like related to, but Jeremy has been a regulating force for Jean, so we lose out on that. So like Andrew understands the most what Jean is going through in this moment, and so that is a good thing for Andrew to be the one who's with him out at the car, but like Jeremy is definitely the person who can like regulate Jean the most, so we miss out on that. Jean goes back in for the interview, which like goes fine for the rest of it. Then the chapter ends. So let me go ahead and we're going to go 3 points down because we've got Zane, Grayson, parents. It's rough. All right. And then we're going to go, then we'll see what happens. Same day, damage control on damage control. Jeremy is not pleased. Like, this is maybe the first time we've seen him like actually be angry. He did not sign up for whatever the fuck this is. John tells him that his parents were involved with Neil's. Jeremy asks if he want to talk about this at the stadium or home. So previously, like whenever something is tough, Jean would have wanted to go to the court, but this time he chooses home, indicating that like Kat and Layla's and his apartment is a place that has created safety for him. When they get home, Jean breaks Renee's necklace, trying to take his shirt off. Kat sees and offers to fix it. Jeremy's ready to control the story. John tells him not to ask about his sister, okay? The sister is off the table. This is what John tells them. He's gonna like, it's like the lies that Jean and Neil came up with. So like, Kevin, Andrew know the truth, and John is gonna say like the half-truth. So Neil came to meet with the FBI in June and connect them with John because their parents work together. So John lies to his friends and tells them the story that they told the FBI. Neil changed his look after his time in Evermore, which led to him being caught. The FBI wanted to know why, and so Neil came to warn John that the FBI might think he was involved if they investigated Evermore, and that they then told the FBI John would work with them against his parents. Of course, we know that the Moriyamas are behind it, but John doesn't want his friends or the FBI to know that, so no Moriyama mentions. His friends want to know how a French gangster's son is playing Exy in America. John says he was a liability staying in France, so they wanted him elsewhere. They forgive him for not telling them this crazy bullshit, which is only a half-truth anyway. Kat wants John to do some weed to chill out or drink or whatever. But John can recognize that Kevin is using alcohol in a bad way to cope and that he should be dealing in better ways. And he wonders why Kevin is even talking to Betsy if he's also drinking himself to death. And Kevin is also like, you should really be talking to Betsy. So Kat repairs the necklace and hugs John. He lets her. Kat really... This is another moment for me to talk about Kat really being a wonderful person. She does like a minute-long hug, and that helps him come back to himself in the current moment, which is like scientific, has some scientific, research around it on like a really long hug and how that can help you. I don't like hugs, but there's research out there. John and Jeremy call Coach Riemann, rehash the interview. Coach says he'll talk to the school board and ask them to, tell their teammates, and institutes like a no talking to the press rule. So John and Kevin talk about Jeremy going to law school. Disgusting. Can you believe it? This man should be playing pro Exy. And Kevin says his step-grandfather is a senator, so yeah, family tradition. Like, apparently Kevin had given John like a packet that told him all about this, but for some reason John didn't read it because he doesn't like reading it in English. The interview airs. It's mostly okay, but yeah, everyone knows Kevin and John speak Japanese and etc. Coach Riemann calls to ask Jeremy if he's warned his parents, and yeah, he hasn't and isn't going to deal with that today. So he basically like turns his phone off and is like, I'm not dealing with that issue. The evening goes on. They hear from Neil, who basically says, you can't talk about it. Things are okay. And then Bryson, Jeremy's brother, shows up. And Layla, like, tries to deal with it and say, like, oh, he's not here. But John isn't having it and goes and, like, fucks him up. He, like, throws him onto Layla's car and it breaks Layla's windshield. And then Layla tells Bryson that she'll find witnesses to say Bryson vandalized her car. So, yeah. And then Jeremy thanks John for protecting them, but is also like, don't do that shit. That's like a low. We're going on for Jeremy. He's angry about like this kind of not knowing what's going on, and then like down low for like his brother and his family and the kind of consequences of that. So we're going down. And then for Jean though, like the fact that his friends are so helpful and like hug him and like blah blah blah, it's a point back up. So yeah, I'm at the end of this sheet of paper. Jean is super proud of his team. This is chapter 11, starting here on the 13th. Everyone's so great to John, and Jeremy is like very proud of his team. Lucas is like, oh, so you were 16, and John's like, yeah, let's not talk about the horrific sexual abuse I faced. And I would love to go a chapter without talking about it, but of course we can't. Ananya brings John Band-Aids to cover his fingernails to stop him from hurting himself when he gets upset. So Kat helps him put them on. Derek and Derek are trying their best. I love the himbo strategy from the Double D line. We have some casual homophobic microaggressions thrown in front from other teammates. But what are you going to do in 2007? Apparently, the interview is turning the tide in public opinion in support of John. Now, Jeremy does have to go home because of the interview. And we learn he doesn't have access to his passport, birth certificate, or social security card. And I want to side note this because he's a legal adult. That is illegal to withhold those vital documents from someone. So his parents are committing a crime. And I don't know whether, like, Jeremy doesn't want to deal with the fact that that's a crime, or whether Nora, like, didn't know that was a crime. I'm going to give her benefit of the doubt and assume that she does know that it's a crime, and say that, like, she just thinks that Jeremy would be too afraid of the consequences to, like, escalate that, because Yeah, it is illegal. Kat and John show up on motorcycles, which I love. John has to ask Jeremy if he will give him a ride on Saturday to the doctor. Jeremy, once they leave, Jeremy's mom is like, do you have any friends that are white? So, yeah. He argues with her to let him stay with his friends. She has nothing nice to say about him. She puts an ultimatum that he sign up for the LSATs and then he can stay with Layla for the last week of summer. Technically, classes don't start until the 27th, so 2 weeks, unless, like, Nora messed up somewhere in here. I don't know. Doesn't matter to me, really. The rest of the week is good. They're enjoying themselves. On Saturday, they go to John's appointment. Apparently, John is claustrophobic and doesn't do elevators. The appointment is with a psychiatrist that can help John overcome his swimming fear. This makes Jeremy hopeful and relieved, and honestly, same. In the waiting room, they discuss Jeremy's family. In my opinion, he's going to fail the LSAT regardless of whether Bryson wants him to or not, because he never studies for it, or basically, like, he tries to study for it, but then he always gives up. So the therapy session was rough on John, but he will be going back. And Jeremy does what he can, and I think this is a good step. So let's see, where are we? So we're back up. We're like here. And then what did we say? This goes through to the Saturday. So let's give a point up for that little therapy situation. And then we're going to go even further down because you have to stay at your home. And then you get to come back and live with everybody. So let's go back up. So yeah. All right. Chapter 12. It's the first day of classes. So what we're going to do, let's just do kind of hold steady to the first day of classes. And then the same thing with Jeremy. I'm going to let him slowly come back to baseline for the first day of classes. So it's the first day of classes. Based upon USC's academic calendar for the 2007-2008 school year, it's August 27th. Jeremy this is also Jeremy POV. Jeremy wakes up at the crack of dawn. It's chapter 12. Jeremy wakes up at the crack of dawn to get over to Layla's. Unfortunately, there's a drawing of a guillotine taped to the door. So when Jeremy and John leave, they are bombarded by press. Their address has been leaked. They're rude. They're asking all the questions, wondering about crime. Jeremy pushes them off. They mention something from Jeremy's past that we don't know about yet. And then Kat and Layla show up on bikes to push everyone away from them. And Kat just starts talking about how excited she is for the XC season. That's a dip down for everybody. Typical first day of school stuff. Jeremy and John go to their pottery class, and John is good at it. LOL. What fun. I'm glad Jeremy forced him to take this because, like cooking, doing art is stress relieving. Cody gets John because he always has to be with somebody else. And I love these two. They don't make any sense together, but they are fun to read together. After practice, a journalist is at their home. And I say journalist in quotes because no journalist in this book has ever learned or practiced journalism ethics. And it's like we're getting a bad rap for journalists in this book. Well, in the AFTG, but in this book as well. So anyway, bad raps for journalism. Jeremy and Layla get rid of him, and they say that they now have like cameras and security guards watching the house. All right, chapter 13, August 27th to 31st. So we have Jean's POV for this chapter. It's John's first week of school. He's not used to real college after the Raven schedule. John's spending time with Tanner, who he's doing Raven drills with, and he comments to Jeremy that Tanner wouldn't like him if he behaved the way he wants to, like a Raven. Jeremy asks if doing that would, like harming Tanner when he messes up, would make John happy, and tells him he doesn't think it would. John considers this and considers the fact that the Trojans get good results without the violence, and you can see the like cogs beginning to turn in this man's head. and beginning to see things in a new way. And I appreciate Tanner as like kind of a foil to John, because Tanner is probably like 18. And so he's only 1 year younger than John, and represents kind of like what John could have been if he'd had a normal life. On Friday, John and Jeremy meet up, and John can smell cologne on Jeremy, which isn't Jeremy's. And which, boy, knowing what he smells like. Jeremy says he ran into a friend, and John really doesn't like Jeremy smelling like another man. I wish this man could have better things than random hookups. And don't worry, Layla agrees with me, which we'll get to later on. Cody shows up. They talk about the banquet. Jeremy hasn't been in 3 years. John is kind of shocked. Jeremy leaves to go scrub the cologne off. So yeah, Jeremy's a little upset about that. Cody tells John a little bit of the story. His freshman year, Jeremy brought his brother Noah to the banquet, and then he got invited to a party and sent Noah back to the hotel, where Noah jumped off the roof of that hotel and died. Cody says Jeremy. John was in a rough spot after that for a while, and so he hasn't been back to the banquet. Cody asks John to keep an eye on Jeremy. Role reversal right there. John promises to protect Jeremy, thinking of like how he protected Neil in the past. Let me do a little bit of drawing some lines. So let's go back up for the pottery class, and then kind of down, or the downturn on the 30th. And then John, let's kind of just bring him back up to here. I feel like a chapter break in here would have been nice, but there isn't one. It's still chapter 13 for the morning of the 31st. So, bus ride to the banquet. Jeremy and John sit together, Avi. John has brought nothing to do for a 9-hour bus ride. Which, by the way, I think the math is not mathing here. They leave at 9 a.m. 9 hours past 9 a.m. would be 6 p.m. Pacific time. And Nora keeps mentioning that they're going to Arizona, which is in mountain time. But most of Arizona does not do daylight savings time. So during this time in August, California, like Pacific time and the time in Tucson, mountain time, would be the same time. So, and like Coach says he wanted them to arrive an hour early. So really they would have needed to like leave at 8 a.m. to arrive there at 5 p.m. In Arizona. That doesn't make sense. They should have left at 8 a.m. I don't really know why I'm demanding perfection on this, but I do, like, because it is just kind of nitpicky, right? It doesn't really matter. But I do feel like I read a book that was set in the city where I live, and the author just kept giving like the wrong instruction, like kept talking about street names and directions that you would go to walk from one place to another that were just like incorrect, and it really like was very distracting. And so I feel like for someone who is from Arizona and you're reading this book and you're like, well, but we don't do daylight savings time, so why do you keep mentioning mountain time? It's the same as Pacific time in August from March to November. It's the same. You would be like a little annoyed. So like, yeah, I'm like, it doesn't take long to check these things. You don't need to, like, I don't know. But the fact that this is incorrect, it just annoys me a little bit. Jeremy tries to speak to John in French on the bus ride. But John, whose heart does beat a little faster at him speaking in French, says he can't speak with Jeremy because he has a southern French accent, being from Marseille. Which he explains the difference between to Jeremy. Jeremy says he'll find a tutor from Marseille, which John points out is silly because no one would take him seriously if he spoke Southern French. But Jeremy says he's only learning French to speak with John. John is in gay panic and wishes he sat next to Cody. He's saved by the other half of the team calling him out, in French by the way, to come sit with them. The Double Ds want double the trouble, apparently, and ask John to sit with them for a moment. It's fine for a while, but then conversation turns to the nest and Raven culture. John's defense is different than usual. He does say the atmosphere of the nest is crucial to Raven's success, but he does see that it breaks people down to a point where they can't function outside of it. He argues that he and Kevin made it out because they're better players, perfect quote, and they ask him if he intends to keep the tattoo. That's about as much as John's willing to deal with, and he leaves them for Jeremy before memories of Rico can fully take over. He teaches Jeremy a French phrase to say if he needs to leave the banquet, a code, shall we say, and then they like settle into silence for the rest of this bus ride. Lighten Jeremy's mood with that. It's going to be difficult. I'm going to need to redraw this line because there's going to be a lot going on here. We might need like a little piece of paper to zoom in on. Yeah, we're going to do just a squiggle there. Chapter 14, August 31st. This is the day of the banquet still, so it's a Friday. Chapter 13 ends in like kind of 5 p.m. Let's assume it ends like 4 p.m., 3 p.m. On this bus ride still to Arizona. And then chapter 14 and chapter 15 also take place during this weekend while they're in Arizona, or during the banquet, August 31st. They arrive at the hotel. Jeremy and John take the stairs. Claustrophobia, recall. So Jeremy wonders like why cars are okay, but elevators are not, which honestly, I kind of wondered that too. But I guess cars are like easier to get out of. Like an elevator, you're kind of trapped in until it gets to the floor and it could stop and you could not know what's going on. So a car, normally you can get out of. John says he doesn't like boxes. No one likes a cage, especially not John. He practices his French on the steps. Jeremy does. John interrupts him to tell Jeremy that he isn't going to law school, and Jeremy invokes his parents, which is like a good tactic with John. John believes adults are authority figures, so he cedes. They get to their room, and Layla, kind of like in the middle of changing from what she was wearing on the bus to what she's wearing for the banquet, so like, you know, in like a camisole, let's say, brings them their bags. And Jeremy sees that John stares at the ceiling to avoid looking at Layla because he doesn't want to look at her, like, you know, look at her body that way. Jeremy considers what John's taste in women might be and then says his mom thinks he should marry Layla, which breaks John out of his bisexual stupor until Jeremy himself takes off his shirt, and then John's like looking at the ceiling again. So they talk about Foxes and the Ravens. The Foxes are off to a rocky start, but the Ravens are even worse. The Ravens have postponed their first game, claiming to be sick, which means with the South's banquet next week, the Ravens won't play until the following week, September 14th, against the Foxes. Rematch. Jeremy's considering all of this when suddenly John is leaning over him, above him on the bed, demanding he say the code phrase. Jeremy stalls and then guesses that Cody told him the story of his first banquet, and John says the story Cody told was incomplete and accuses Jeremy of future lying. Like he says that if he asks Jeremy what happened, Jeremy's not going to tell him the truth. And Jeremy says, no, I wouldn't lie to you. And John says it doesn't matter. He doesn't need the rest of the story to protect Jeremy from everything else because he's his captain and his partner, and I'll stand with him. Oh, these boys. They're fixing each other's ties and collars. These two are ideal for slow burn because John won't allow himself any joy. And yeah, so John won't allow himself any joy, and so he won't go for Jeremy. And Jeremy keeps having flings because he won't go for John because of the trauma. So he seems unavailable. So even though they are both interested, they won't take the final step to actually like be together. Okay, the team that has a vendetta against Jeremy is the White Ridge Bobcats. Not real, by the way. I don't know why some of the schools are real and some are fake. Like if Palmetto is based off of Clemson, like just let it be Clemson. Arizona, the hosts seat White Ridge far from USC, but they're all in the same room anyway, so it doesn't matter. I don't know. A Canadian player speaks to John in French, which is fun. An Arizona player, Ivan Fazer, I don't know. Texts Jeremy to hit him up for the night, and Jeremy kind of like waffles on that. Of course, some White Ridge players come to harass Jeremy, bringing out candy sugar sticks. That's a reference to cocaine. They circle closer to the incident of 4 years ago until John slams his fist on the table between Jeremy and Connors, who's the White Ridge goalkeeper. Connors says John should have come to them where he could still be aggressive. John says aggression is tired and that he must learn something new to improve, implying that USC is making him better at XC and pulling on Derek's argument that we talked about earlier. Connors moves on saying, we all know the real reason you're at USC, baiting them both with the queer thing. And Arizona's captain Torres returns and forces Connors to leave. Jeremy can't remember the code, so he asks Torres for a cigarette and then gets up to leave. And John says, do not, but Jeremy just says, walk with me. So they leave the banquet for a moment. So here's where chapter 14 ends, and we move on to chapter 15. So it's the same day, August 31st, just like when they've walked outside. And this one is still from Jeremy POV. As soon as they're outside, John snatches the cigarettes away. He would have not survived the foxes. Jeremy gets them anyway and lights up. Jeremy thanks John for not actually hitting Connors. John offers to privately fuck him up, of course, but Jeremy says no. As they're about to head back in, John asks about a name that came up, Dex. Jeremy asks what Cody told John. John says only about Noah, and that Jeremy had been at a party, none of the details. So Jeremy thinks about lying, but John reminds him he promised not to lie. So Jeremy says he'll tell him tomorrow. They go back in. The rest of the banquet goes fine. The Trojans support John and Jeremy. They're great. Layla says John's done well. John says they don't know the real me because the real me is the mean me, the Raven me. And Layla and Kat ask him if he wants to be mean to them, if he thinks that will help them improve. And he says no, realizing the hypocrisy here. So yeah, that's good for our boy. We're going to go kind of down here for the kind of nastiness at the banquet. And I'm going to go up here for being a good protector and for realizing things are, you're a hypocritical, silly boy. Unfortunately, Jeremy does not listen to his voice of reason, Layla, and decides to go meet up with, I'm going to say Ivan. Decides to meet up with Ivan, leaving John, Kat, and Layla at the hotel. At Ivan's apartment, Ivan wants to do shots, telling Jeremy he'll have to taxi back, which he can't do on his monitored credit card account. Double, unfortunately, Ivan wants to talk about John, calls Jeremy a shameless slut, which I'm like, okay, bitch, what are you? They have sex, and then Ivan falls asleep. Jeremy texts Layla to see if she'll come get him, which of course she does, because she's a saint. So she taxis out there, picks him up, they taxi back. Layla says Jeremy never sleeps with anyone who respects him. I agree. Jeremy deflects, says the rumors about John are because of his scandals, because of Jeremy's scandals, which is not entirely true, but it doesn't help. But also that's so victim blaming, so let's not do that. When they get back to the room, John sees the bruises Ivan left on Jeremy and says he'll kill him. Jeremy says it's not the same as what happened to John. Layla blocks Ivan's number on Jeremy's phone. When Jeremy finishes his shower, John asks him what the cocaine jokes were all about at the banquet, and Jeremy tells him about being addicted to Oxy in high school. Because his brother and his sister were in a car accident, and so they were had a high opiate kind of drugs, and they his brother would pass them to Jeremy, and so Jeremy got hooked on them, and then his brother got him hooked on cocaine. Tragedy. Yeah, prescription drug addictions are definitely a pipeline to many different kinds of street drugs, but I think you're more likely to do heroin or other opioids if you're already hooked on opioid narcotic painkillers. So yes, you could get into cocaine from being addicted to prescription drugs, but prescription painkillers, but I think you're more likely to get addicted to heroin. But I guess we didn't Nora didn't want to deal with like track marks or something. I don't know. As a freshman, he was invited to an exclusive after party from the banquet, made up mostly of other like closeted gay characters. He brought coke to the party, which is what the cops found, along with everyone in various states of undress, etc., when they came to find him after Noah's death. So Dexter, the captain of White Ridge, was the one who took the fall for the party and the debauchery and lost everything, as did many of the other players caught up in the scandal, and they blamed Jeremy, which is like fair enough, but also like, man, he did not mean for his brother to die and then for the cops to find you guys, so whatever. But John asks if he knew Noah would jump, and Jeremy says they all knew what Noah was dealing with. John asks if he's clean now. The answer is yes, he was in rehab. John listens and doesn't judge him, and John still wants the name of who Jeremy was with. I feel like we're making bad choices here, but like also telling the truth, so maybe we dip down and then come back up. And Jean, I'm just going to leave where he is. Chapter 16, then, is the first week of September. So through to from 9/1 to 9/7. Press from other teams re Jean at the banquet. They all have good things to say. Kat says it's nice to be liked, but it's not to last, though, because on Thursday, September 6th, their address is revealed. They get a ton of fan mail, fan/hate mail. Some are bad, some are whatever. One is in French from an old teammate who says she understands him more given recent events and will keep him in her thoughts. John goes to bed on an empty stomach. So yeah, that is bad. So let's go. And this is John's POV, right? Let's go over to here and do like this. And then Jeremy is gonna go like that. All right, we don't really know much about him this week. Friday, September 7th is game day. So they are gonna play the White Ridge team that we all hate so much. Okay, so John sees that Jeremy is very tired because Jeremy has been traveling back and forth from his home, like his parents' home, to the campus. And it's like a really long, it's like an extra long drive. And yeah, it's taking a toll on him. Ooh, that's sad. Jeremy gets a notification that a freshman, Raven, has died. John doesn't know him, but is somewhat surprised that a freshman who'd avoided Tetsuji and Riko would crumble so fast. More mail to go through, ruining John's mood. At the stadium, the Trojans plan. They are playing White Ridge, and they expect them to go after Jeremy and John. Jeremy because they hate him, and John because he's weak to violence. A bit of fun with the Double D's and the oft-mentioned Charisse, which I don't know if I've mentioned Charisse before, but Charisse is one of the Derek's cousin, and the other Derek is in love with her. John notes how diff the vibe is from what he's used to. He thinks the Trojans fall in love too easily. Kat asks if he's never been in love. He says Ravens aren't allowed relationships. Kat asks him what happened, and he remembers like homophobia from Riko and all the violence. And he says he got caught and doesn't want to talk about it. And then they hug it out because they love to do so. First half, John sees he's wrong in his appraisal of the Trojans as pushover. He tells Jeremy that you are very good, and Jeremy says we are very good. And then they're up 2 at the half. And then chapter 17 is the second half of the game. So that's also 9/7. John is playing in the second half. So he locks the violence down because he's got to honor that contract or face his coach's heavy-handed wrath. So that's what John says. And I want to take a moment to question that. In no way have these coaches ever demonstrated any kind of wrath. I do not believe that they would do so. I mean, I know that they wouldn't. Now, John has beliefs and fears about adults that are hard to break. So for him, it's kind of guilty until proven innocent. And that's a much harder thing to prove. So it's for him, he sees adults as like always likely to hurt younger people. So for him, it's like hard not to see that he would get that these adults would hurt him if he does something wrong. His mark hinges being a bully, but John won't give in. He uses Cats Have a Winning Day. Hinch pummels him, but John still doesn't give. Jeremy tells Hinch to stop, and Hinch calls them both the F slur, is how I'm going to phrase that. John gets a new mark, Lander, who he recognizes from the banquet after Hinch gets like taken out of the game. Landers is better at violence, and the 8th time he beats on John, John has to drop his racket to prevent himself from hitting him, losing his mark. Since he can't fight Lander, he fights himself, slamming his racket into his own shin. He chases after Landers. Shit happens. Landers comes after him, and John vaults over him like a madman. He and Layla clear the ball, and the Trojans score. John gets subbed off, and Riemann asks him what the hell that was about. And John says he shouldn't have had let Lander get away from him. And Riemann says, no, why'd you hit yourself? And he says he never wants to see that behavior again. And he sends both him and Jeremy to the nurse. Jeremy tells John on the way there that it's not about being perfect, but being better overall. And they win the game 9-6. So press comes to interview Jerjan. Unfortunately, because the press for some reason loves drama at the expense of ethics, they've invited Zane. So down from the stands to speak with John. So there's like a little bit of verbal tit for tat. And then John invites Zane to follow him to the locker room and asks Jeremy to like block the reporter from following them. So in the locker room, John says he signed a contract and won't fight on court. Zane makes fun of him, gets mad at him, fights him, etc. John says he couldn't do anything about Rico not giving Zane the number. John says he trusted Zane. Zane says he should be thanking him for like letting Grayson rape him. So twisted. Lucas walks in, and even Nora knows that's insane. Zane launches at Lucas, and John pushes him off course and tells Lucas to get out. Zane implies John should be dead, that he deserved, even asked for what happened to him. Riemann comes in and decks Zane and tells him to never come back. Riemann takes John to his office, and this is the breaking point that Jeremy feared would come during the swimming pool incident on June 18th back in book 1. An unknown man, Adi, is there who says he's heard so much about John before leaving, and that reminds John of all the terrible things that everyone must have heard about him and all the things that people have said about him. And he expects Riemann to beat him, even like hopes that he will, because then he won't have to like talk to him about it. And instead Riemann tells him to talk. John says he said he liked it, the like sexual assault, because he wasn't allowed to say no, that he didn't know what else to do, through like halting sentences, silently thinking of saying he didn't want it, he hated it. And here he goes through the extent of it in memory, and yeah, it's like, it's awful, really just like despicable stuff. John says he has no right to complain, that he deserved it. Riemann puts his hands on his shoulder and asks John to say he didn't deserve it. And as soon as he hesitantly does, he can't believe it, almost throwing up and clawing at his face, but Riemann stops him, saying he's sorry they didn't protect him better. And then Riemann is like holding a shattered John, telling him he's safe and to let go, which he does. So to me, this is like all the way to rock bottom. This is rock bottom. Like, my God. It's like the breaking point. But I think we kind of had to go there in order to come back up. But yeah, it's a steep drop. This moment is insanely climactic for only 70% of the way through the book. And I was seriously like, what else can happen in this book? What else could happen to our boy in the rest of this? It's like just kind of crazy. So then chapter 18 is the next morning, and it's kind of a reminiscence of chapter 1 of the Sunshine Court. So John wakes up in a like unfamiliar room. He leaves the room and finds Riemann and Adi, that man from last night, in the kitchen. So Coach is gay. It's a win for us all. Depending on his age, he would have had to come of age during the AIDS crisis, and that's horrible to think about. So we're just going to move on from that. because remember, we're not thinking about politics or contemporary politics. They serve John breakfast, and Riemann says it'll be 20 minutes till Jeremy can pick him up, and that Riemann will be out back. Addie tells John that Riemann would never hurt him, and then John is left alone and sees like many photos of Riemann and Addie together. John continues to the outdoors where Riemann is gardening and asks John to help. John doesn't understand why Riemann behaves this way. He doesn't think coaches act this way. But then he's thinking about Wymack and wondering if two of them are exceptions or if the Ravens are the weird ones. And I'm like, yes, baby, you are on the right track. Jeremy arrives, and then he says he knew letting him go with Zane had been bad, but John says the fight was overdue, that he needed to see Zane. He feels less broken and not more, but not because of Zane's aggression, but rather because of like what Coach Riemann did after it. So John is finally talking about what he might want, which Jeremy wants to know because he doesn't know how to help him. And this is the most tense like the two of them are, because Jeremy's like, you should be fighting for the things you deserve. And Jeremy's like, I don't care what I deserve. Like, let me talk about what I want. And they're like, Jeremy's like, please do. So it's a little tense, but like, it's good that they're having this conversation. What John wants is to let Zane be in the past. He tells Jeremy he doesn't want to be like the Bobcats, doesn't want a coach to be like the master, and doesn't want to hurt his teammates when they fail, and says he wants to do it the Trojan way rather than the Raven way. So we were at rock bottom, and I feel like we've come surging right back up. I'm gonna go to like here. Yeah, it's truly amazing. They talk about Coach and Addie, which is a secret, not so secret relationship. Jean is doing some thinking of all the things that make him calm. So, rainbows, open roads, friends, fireworks. He thinks about Wymack and Riemann and eventually settles on thinking of them as fathers. In the twilight of this book, there are several moments that I feel would have made very strong endings and would have been like where I would have cut this book off. This is one of them. It matches with John deciding he has friends from the first book and follows like a similarly large scale mental breakdown. However, we're only at 75%. There's still like much to happen. Back at home, they look at a news article about the game, and John's like leap over Landers is immortalized in photo. I love that. Layla talks about how nice they're writing about John, and John starts to say he doesn't care, but finishes with saying he doesn't want to read the fan mail anymore, and they like decide to just get rid of it. They have to go to his learn to swim psych appointment, but John tells them he wants to sell his Raven car too. Kat says her uncle will buy it, and then John could like himself buy a better motorcycle. At the appointment, John says he deserves to get better. So that's like another. Let's just move right on back up. That's another thing that I'm like, that would have been a perfect ending. Our boy saying he deserves to get better. Of course, that is not the ending. So chapter 19 is the week from the 9th of September to the 14th. Blah, blah, blah. The Trojans are upset John was attacked. But hey, John is finally acting like this is his team, which is great. The Foxes do some press that the Trojans watch. They're being typical Foxes. Neil's acerbic as always and an instigator. He's mentioning that John's ribs have healed and no one knew that they were hurt. Later, Renee says she can't say more, but that they should try the Ravens. The reporter says they're tight-lipped, and Renee says maybe you're asking the wrong Ravens. Jeremy's not with Layla and Kat and John for this press conference as he is forced to live at home. Kat and Layla text him about it. Jeremy's butler, William, has found some Marseille French speakers, one who arranges lessons over Skype, William says hesitantly. Skype was released in 2003 by Estonian developers, but would have lacked widespread use until after 2011 or so when Microsoft bought it. So yes, Skype should be said hesitantly here because it's not really in the zeitgeist yet. They discuss what his mom will think, and William's like, I'm going to protect you. I'll come up with an excuse. As a result of Renee's comments about the wrong Ravens, reporters tracked down Raven graduates, finding that most Ravens who signed with pro teams are failing out of the league, with injuries and chronic pain, exposing the system only works for so long. Which, fine. Maybe no one thought to look, or XC hasn't been around long enough that there's not really like these long-term statistics. But you're telling me that when newscasters are talking about future prospects for these players, they are not looking at the college to pro transition and seeing how long these players are like playing pro. Anyway, this prompts Jeremy to ask Kevin to stop doing night practices because he doesn't want them to burn out. And I'm like, I don't think it's that serious. I think night practice is probably fine. And it's also cute, so I don't care. September 14th is game day. Let's go like right here in Salt Lake City. So Jeremy's doing kind of like, I'm just going to draw like a squiggly line because it's like things are like, he was upset about the Zayn thing, but like he's doing better now. But it's like kind of like, his family is so annoying. So they have a game day in Salt Lake City. They get there early enough to watch the Foxes Ravens game. Seconds into the game, they're in an all-out brawl. And they really get Neil. Like, he is down. And I was like, no, not my baby. The game gets postponed. Yellow cards for Matt and Aaron, red card for Dan, red card and 5-game suspension to Andrew, red cards to all the Ravens. The Trojans have to warm up themselves so they don't know what's going on with Neil or how this escalates for a while. So then we move to chapter 20. Game day is continuing. Jeremy and John are off the line with injuries. During warm-up, the Utah captains accuse the Foxes of bringing it on themselves. Jeremy says, hold up, the Ravens are at fault too, and I hope they get help, but they shouldn't be playing because they're messed up. The Utah players also ask about John, and I'm like, keep his name out of your mouth. Everyone needs to leave this man alone. Xavier says he hates Coach Moriyama, and that the mystery behind his sudden disappearance has caused all the drama, which I was like foreshadowing for the next book. But also, I kind of don't care about Tetsuji, and I hope he's dead. Xavier wants Jeremy to get John to say some of the weird master stuff in front of camera, but Jeremy says no, John is scared of Edgar Allan, and like, who wouldn't be? At halftime, Reuben says that the Ravens have been disqualified and their coach removed. So I was like, yes, let's get it. Yes, vengeance, yes. This is pandemonium in the locker room because it means that the Trojans won't have to face the Ravens in the final, which means it's down to them and Penn State and maybe the Foxes, which, like, of course it's going to be the Foxes. Like, that's, like, the series is about those two teams. So, of course, it's going to be a final between those two. But also John heard from Renee. Neil's out, 2 broken ribs, so he's out for at least the fall semester. Andrew has a fractured clavicle. I'm like, no. I was so sad. The Foxes are definitely still characters here, and I love them, and I really, like, I want to be with them in this moment, but it's okay. But the Trojans do win their game against Utah, by the way. An hour into the bus ride home, Layla gets a call. Their home is on fire. Like, are you kidding me? She asked Coach to drop them in Cedar City, where her uncle will send a private plane to get them. Layla makes like several calls in Arabic. John's blaming himself, saying Ravens fans are mad that the team's been eliminated, and so they're trying to get back at him. Jeremy says he's not to blame and not to burden himself. And Xavier and Min tell him that by blaming himself, he'll be bringing attention to himself that Kat and Layla can't spare right now. Which framing it that way as like being a burden on Kat and Layla really helps John to then not blame himself. John tells Jeremy sorry about the loss of Bark Bark, the cardboard cutout dog that I don't think I've had a chance to mention. And on the plane, they work through listing what they've lost, and like Kat is crying, and it's really sad and terrible. So yeah, the fire. I'm like, Yeah, this is like very depressing. So let's lose 2 points for that. And yeah, so Jeremy, I'm taking you down 1 point because I think you're like more well adjusted, but like still. So Jeremy's up there. All right, so chapter 1, John POV, early morning, September 15th. Guys, everything they had is ruined, including cars and motorcycles, and bikes. Wymack calls John, says they'll think of a way to protect everyone. They go to a hotel and set alarms for 7, which I was like, okay, so if they got this plane, they say they get there like in the early morning, like 4 a.m., like a little after 4. So the amount of time it would have taken them to get from Santa Monica Airport to like the UCLA area, like that has to be like an hour. And then like are they spending like an hour, looking at this, sifting through the stuff, and then like another hour going to a hotel and then checking in? Like they're going to bed at 6 a.m. or so, and like they have no like they really have no time before 7. Jeremy has to deal with his mom. The insurance company is there, and the FBI shows up. Like, Christ alive, can we chill for just a second? No. So the mom thing is like rough. The FBI being there, annoying. They want John to go into witness protection. The FBI thinks their case is so important and cannot fathom that this crime was committed by overzealous Raven fans. And okay, the interplay between the promise to Ichiro and working with the FBI and keeping the FBI from knowing about the Yakuza, like, that's interesting. The witness protection aspect adds more to this because, like, obviously John can't do that because he needs to, like, keep playing Exy, and he can't really tell anyone why because he can't tell the FBI about the Moriyama thing, and he's not Neil who could handle this, so, like, this is just, like, really annoying. He won't do witness protection. Instead, the FBI is going to set them up in a different apartment and offset the rent cost and provide security, which I was like, that's kind of great, TBH. Other than the fact that they don't want to be like bugged by the FBI, like such as in hidden microphones and the other way, as in being annoyed by them. Layla is like really hesitant about this, but they're kind of all out of options. At the new place, Layla sees that they could have a dog there. It's very empty and it's very sad. And they need to go buy stuff, but they only have the one car, Jeremy's car. John offers to use his car, but Layla won't ride in a Raven car, instead suggesting that Kat and John go sell it the next day so they can buy new motorcycles. As they head out to get supplies, Kat says they should invite the Floozies over to fill the space for dinner. Jeremy asks John if he's ready, and John lies and says yes, following Jeremy out the door. So, like, again, could have ended here. It's very bittersweet, but it matches book 1 with the FBI crashing in on the last second and then a rapid resolution. But there's still 40 pages in this book. And from my the notes I was keeping for myself as I was reading this, I said that, like, without having read chapter 22, the end of chapter 21 should have been the end. And I kind of still think that. Like, there are things that happen in the rest of the book that I liked and that I'm happy happened, but, like, I think the book should have been over at chapter 21. Chapter 22, which is chapter 21 was John POV. Chapter 22 is Jeremy again. Kat's convinced Jeremy's mom won't let him ever stay over with them again, which kind of sucks. John and Jeremy go to their respective psychotherapists. Apparently, Jeremy is seeing this doctor, Dr. Spader, who his mother likes, who is like, she still agrees to see Jeremy, even though she's cut off all of her other patients in order to care for her ailing daughter. And then she bills Jeremy's mom for all 4 weeks in the month, but refunds one session a month directly to Jeremy in cash so that he'll have spending money his family doesn't know about. That doesn't seem ethical or practical to me, but whatever. Kevin is on TV in the Spader home and Thea is with him. hate her. Anyway, Neil, Andrew, and Aram pull up in the Maserati we all love in the back of the shot, and Neil gets a chance to tell reporters that Thea's been at Palmetto before. Thea says some crazy shit about like Raven supremacy to the reporters, and then calls the current Ravens a disgrace, like they're not even Ravens. Jeremy leaves to get John. They discuss Thea. He's surprised she would turn on the Ravens, and Jeremy says that's the point. They aren't Ravens to her anymore. Jeremy drives Kat and John to the dealership to sell the car, picking up Riemann. The car was at Riemann's this entire time because they didn't have a place to store it. Who he tells about the FBI apartment sitch and that he's not safe with Layla anymore for his mom, but hopefully the LSAT will change that, which I'm like, will it? You never study. You are not going to pass the LSAT. Jeremy arrives home and has to speak with his stepfather, who full-throated calls him a slur and threatens to kick him out. Monetarily, I see why that would be bad, but I kind of am like, would it not be better if you were kicked out? Anyway, Kat and John show up on their new bikes. Jeremy, I'm gonna like, this is just like he's having the worst time ever in this situation. He's kind of like under house arrest. Because that's what his stepfather was talking to him about. Like they're going to be out of town for for the next week or so. So I'm going to do a bump up for getting the new bike. That's fun. And selling the car. Monday, September 17th, we get a series of Raven suicides, and I think we're being a little too cavalier with the suicides. I'm not a fan of that. It's a little too, like, I don't know, samurai, like killing themselves for dishonor. But maybe that's the point. I don't know. Anyway, I kind of wish Nora hadn't packed those on here at the end. Like, it's just, we've lost 8 players, including Rico and Grayson, who were murdered, and I guess that supposedly these affect John because it makes other people mad at him and he was their teammate. But then Nora says in the press speculation about these deaths, they don't even bring up John. So I don't even know why we're worried about these deaths. Like, I just feel like they're kind of senseless. Like, it is like, they're like the effect of Thea talking to the press. But like, I'm like, I don't care that much about the Ravens. And like, I don't like this attempt to make me care about them either. Tuesday, September 18th, Jeremy is stuck at home, but the gang comes over to see him anyway. They have a big like cuddle puddle sleepover. John says he feels a bit bad for the suicides since he asked Wymack to protect them and Wymack brought Thea to the press, and that was kind of what set off the rash of the suicides. But my heart is just not in the blame game. And neither is his, because he says he's not sorry and he will choose Jeremy every time, Jeremy and Kat and Layla every time. Again, this feels very epilogue-y here. Like, we're packing on the damage, which I feel is like not very useful at the end of the book. And the end of 21 like definitely had like a hopefulness to it that is like not here right now. So we're gonna plateau through this week. The fact that his friends come over through his house arrest, I think, is enough to bring like Jeremy back up. And the fact that John is like will choose them as like a positive. So maybe I'll pump him back up too. Chapter 23, Wednesday, September 19th. Another Raven in the hospital. Another discussion of the failures of mental health from the Ravens and their supposed families. The Ravens do announce a new coach, and I'm sorry, is anyone still paying attention to the Ravens? Not me. I thought John wasn't a Raven and didn't need to know about them. Like, I don't need to know about them. Anyway, John does send an email to Sergio, a Raven, about the person who's like, about Lyle, who's in the hospital. They have another Wilshire sleepover. John continues emailing with Sergio, but it doesn't go well. The last email calls John afraid, and he shuts the computer down, which I don't love the implications of for the next book. Saturday morning, the 22nd. So let's go ahead and plateau and then like dip back down for the email thing. I'm gonna leave you up here. Friday, September 21st, they have a game against Vegas. They win back at the Wilshires. Jeremy is showing the tiredness from the long drives, and also his mom calls him like every hour, multiple times a day for his current location. Saturday, September 22nd, Jeremy awoken by a morning call. John says his mom will never trust him, which, like, yes, but also he is lying so all the time. So why should his mom trust him? They have therapy, then they go their separate ways. John asks Jeremy to stay with them at their apartment. He doesn't. They go shopping for furniture and replacement laptops. The trip is a disappointment because Layla just can't find anything that reminds her of home, and it's really rough for her. At home, they hear a dog bark. Layla is renewed in her desire for a dog. Kat's not sure with their schedule that it'll work, and Layla's just like, well, then I'm going to bed. John says it'd be a mistake to Kat, but he knows, like, with how upset Layla is, like, Kat's gonna cave and they're gonna get a dog. Sunday, September 23rd, more furniture shopping. Layla is on edge. Kat explains that this was the home that burned down was the first place she could truly call home. And there's a few sweet moments in here. John picks up a painting Layla seemed to like, to get for the apartment, which he does have money now because of the car selling, because he sold the car. Out on the balcony, he untangles and braids her hair for her like she'd done for him back in late July. They talk about family, and John braids her hair like he'd done for Elodie, his sister. He tells Layla about her, and he mentions her love of blackberries. Layla says they could grow some, and he says no, but maybe they could grow something else. A family. He gives his blessing for getting a dog. Let's see. Let's go back up over this weekend with the Layla situation. We're just going to flatline Jeremy up here because he's not really in this. All right. And then Monday, September 24th, this chapter is entirely about getting the dog, which I do love. If anything happens to the dog, I swear to God, Nora, like, there will be consequences. But this whole period since chapter 21, the last 25% of this book has felt like an epilogue. And the characters have been, like, very depressed. Not a lot has happened. I do like ending on the dog, which is an older dog who was an owner surrender that hasn't warmed up to anyone at the shelter. And then obviously it immediately takes to John, and John can relate to also having been abandoned. Jeremy pays the fee and then has to, like, immediately field a call from his mother about the expense. But in the meantime, let's just be happy about the dog. Renee checks in. Jeremy says he wants to see the foxes John says he wants to see the foxes in the final and sends a pic of the dog and Jeremy. Renee says Jeremy is handsome, and John's like, but Renee pushes him to forget his old rules. They name the dog Jabberwocky, which in my opinion is not better than Rex. And John lets himself pretend that the rules have changed, which, okay. The braid is sweet, and ending on the dog is nice, but yeah, it's totally dragged out. So let's go up. I'm going to plateau here, or we're going to come to there on John, which is, and up here for Jeremy. So Jeremy is back at, like, where he originally started, which is good. Fine, that's his baseline. And then Jean is at an 8, coming up from a 3 that we started with at the end of, or a 2. Was it a 2? I can't remember anyway. A 2, 2, and 8. Nora says there's one more book. So I suppose 3 will culminate in maybe this year's championship, which would be in April. So we have to cover from not even October yet to April, which is 6 months. And maybe it'll culminate in the trial, like the end of senior year, like where they're going. And it's as much year to cover that was in both the first and the second book. So I'm a little worried about how long it might be, because Nora loves to add daily detail. But, you know, I'm wondering whether we're looking at, like, actually 2 books here. But yeah, obviously the plot, we're probably looking at a Fox's Trojans final. And honestly, I'm torn on who to root for. The Foxes are still definitely like an underdog team, especially with the injuries. And there's like been several mentions of it. They have a bunch of crazy freshmen, and Neil's got to get better. Nora is hammering in that the Trojans have always finished second or so, and that this could be their year. So I'm kind of like, I want them to win. And anyway, if this was just about the goddamn Exy, I would be excited for the final book. But yeah, there's a lot of other stuff going on with like the trial with Jean's parents, and like making sure that the FBI does not find out about the Moriyamas. So yeah, and looking at the structure of this one compared to the last one, it doesn't even track. Like, this book is way more intense. It's like way more focused on specific days. It covers less time. I think John is overall doing much better in this book, and it's become much more about both of them because John and Jeremy both have issues to deal with, which I feel like makes the dual POV a lot more justified. Like, Jeremy is much more of a character in this book, and I honestly feel like he would be a more interesting character to me if he was in any other book series. Like, the fact that his issues are trying to compete with like what John's dealing with is like, I'm like, you just don't have it as bad. So, but yeah, like it's just all over the place here. I really feel like the book should have ended here at the end of 21, like with the fire and everything, or like at the end of chapter 18. Like, it should have ended earlier. I find all the stuff that happened, like with the dog, like that's very sweet, but the rest of this, like the suicides and everything, it's just like, we didn't need it. So in my opinion, it should have ended earlier. And maybe like the dog thing could have been like an extra story, or like a 0.5. Sometimes authors will do like a 0.5 story in between books. I feel like that's where the dog should have been, because it's really nice as a standalone little story with these friends. But yeah, this book was so crazy in the middle 50%. I did still like it. Just in my opinion, it was not as strong as the Sunshine Court. But I did still like it, but I am concerned about how long the third book will be, because it has to cover, as from October to April, and I just feel like it's going to be like 400, 500 pages or something. So I don't have a problem with that, but it's hard to make a video about a 500-page book. So actually, I am concerned. I feel like if the third one, the big moments to me are obviously going to be, I think the holidays will be interesting. Obviously, Jean has no one to go back to, and Jeremy doesn't really want to go back to his family. So, like, maybe we'll have a cute, like, the four of them will have a cute holiday or something. And John obviously hasn't celebrated the holidays before or taken that long of a break from Exy, so that should be interesting. Obviously, we have the trial of Jean's parents to worry about. The championship, Neil's got to recover, Andrew's got to recover from their injuries. So those are, I feel like, some of the big things that will be happening in the third book. And I'm very excited to see what will happen and how long it will be.
All right, so I am editing the video now, and I realized there was like a major thing I forgot to talk about, which is the fact that like these kids never go to the club. And that was like a major thing in the first books, was these kids from South Carolina going to like a like gay club in South Carolina in 2006. So I don't know why our group in LA is not like out at the drag shows, out at the club. Like, these kids should be at the club. Like, I don't know if it would be good for John to go to the club, and obviously like they did a lot of drugs when they went to the club in AFTG, but like they should be at the club. They are a queer friend group in LA. What are they doing? So that was like another thing that's like one thing that was like, why is this not in here?
So anyway, thank you for supporting this video. Like, comment, and subscribe. I have no idea when the third book will come out. So I have no idea when this channel will come back, because as much as I'd love to make videos about other things, I don't really know what to do them about, and I also don't really have time to dedicate to this. Like I do a lot of other things, so which is funny because I was actually at Katsucon a couple weeks ago, and I always see people at Katsucon wearing like Fox's uniforms. And I'm always like, do I tell this person that I have made multiple hours of video content about these books? And then I don't tell them because that would be weird. But yeah, like I cosplay, I do a lot of other art projects and that kind of thing, and I just don't have time to really be dedicated to having a YouTube channel, unfortunately. But I do like making these videos, and thank you guys for supporting them. So bye for now, and I'll see you when the next book comes out, probably, if not sooner.